thousands, in the millions, and we will be. Because it starts right here.
Guilty!
And welcome back to Naptown People's Radio. We are in the last week of Black August, but I'm still going to say a happy Black August, y'all. This is a weekly podcast of the Indianapolis branch of the Party for Socialism and Liberation. I'm your host, Dani Abdullah, and I'm here with my comrade and co-host,
Derek Ford.
We're here to guide you through the pressing issues facing Indianapolis from the perspective of our people, not our oppressors. And as organizers involved in these issues, we're not just talking about the news, we're making it happen. On this episode, we will be interviewing Nino Brown, an organizer and educator currently living in Chicago. Brown works with the Jericho movement, which is a movement dedicated to freeing political prisoners in the U.S. He's also a member of Black Men Build and the Minister of Information at Healthy Hood Chicago. He will be joining us to talk about his chapter in the Hampton Reader, Notes from a Working Class Think Tank, in which he talks about the need for proletarian multinational unity. Often society talks about multiculturalism, but multinationalism is not something that everyone in our class knows about. So prepare yourselves to learn a lot. Again, Nino is an educator. Derek's going to be interviewing him. He is a professional yapper, as well as, you know.
Thank you.
I mean, he's on the podcast for a reason, but also a professor. So like two very intelligent human beings talking about like multinationalism. Derek's looking at me, so maybe Derek is not
it's just
intelligent.
That's the kindest thing you've ever said to me.
That is not the kindest thing I've ever said to you. I'm so nice to you. Don't do that. But before we get into it with Nino, let's get into it with Derek and the Naptown Breakdown. So what's happening in Naptown this week, Derek?
Well, this week I want to talk about a couple things on the education front. So first, a recent article by Mirror Indy highlights a unique public comment period during the IPL Board of Trustees meeting, that's the Indianapolis Public Library Board of Trustees meeting, where two local teachers expressed outrage over charter schools trying to recruit families inside of public libraries. One teacher mentioned that it's inappropriate for the library to give space to charter schools, they are public after all, considering the IPS book lending partnership, which is called the Library Shared System. To expand on this ill-suited move, we want to point out that just this year, multiple bills were passed that aimed to defeat public schools and help bolster charter schools. One of those infamous bills is, of course, HB 1001, which increased charter school vouchers. And this is, really a way in which two of our, central public institutions, the school and the library, are both being, attacked for privatization, which is another way of saying that they're taking things that are public and trying to make them private, and nothing new is being produced, right? Like they're just taking something that already exists, that belongs to us, the public, and then they're just transferring it into private hands. And those things that we want to defend those things, right? But we also want to be careful how we defend them and what we are defending. And so here I'm thinking about the recent attacks on quote unquote DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion at universities. DePaul University, where I teach, we have a Center for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. These are now being renamed to, Centers for Human Belonging, et cetera. The Attorney General, Todd, who is really in touch with the population here, when he's not going after China and TikTok, has launched investigations into private schools like Butler and DePaul after taking control over the entire Indiana university system, whose president, Pamela Whitten, by the way, has plagiarized large portions of her dissertation. And there was an independent investigation, and apparently that they launched, several years ago. The results were never released. But then Chronicle of Higher Education released an article that found like 85 words were taken basically word for word. She might have changed the verb tense of one word in her dissertation. So we will see if anything comes of that. But honestly, university presidents are basically they basically like don't know anything or, so I wouldn't be surprised if she gets promoted to attorney general after that. But here's the thing is, one of our comrades, Too Black, has a very important critique of DEI and the sort of, we got to protect it, right? They're coming for DEI, and he says, like, why would we defend DEI? It was never really existed to begin with in the first place, right? Think about like diversity, equity, and inclusion. It's really diversity, equity, and inclusion is really the result of the absorption of the radical student movement and demands of the 1960s and 70s into the university, right? Where, the tremendous gains that were made, the creation of Black studies, ethnic studies, Chicano studies, free admission, to CUNY schools and other universities. Black studies is a perfect case in point, right? Because those are now, they're rarely called Black studies. They're Africana studies, and really the radical wing of that, those who, were connected with those who are just outside of the, university walls, were pushed out systematically over the years. And now they're basically occupied by, liberals who are now bemoaning the death of our great American democracy. And they have no really materialist analysis of race and of nationality. And it's like, wait, why are we defending this thing? And I was actually talking to my students about this the other day because we're reading a book by Roderick Ferguson called We Demand, which kind of talks precisely about this, how the university did employ repression, of course, against, the protesters. Like one of our comrades, Ken Hammond, was one of the Kent State, 27. He organized he was with SDS, organized the demonstration. One of his friends, was killed in front of him. And then he was on the run. And actually went to Nepal as part of a speaking tour to raise funds for their legal defense. But so they did employ repression, but they also, invited people in. But let's think about inclusion. Like, what are we being included into? Do you want to be included into a system of, white supremacy and capitalism and like a corporate university? Or do you want to, really it should be insurrection, not inclusion, right? We want to create an entirely new university, an entirely new system. And so I think that, as we find ourselves like maybe on the same side as some Republicans who apparently are going to back Michael Paul Hart against the Google data center, which is good, they should, right? But of course, they're doing it because they say that land is such a great commodity that there's a better use for it. We're saying they shouldn't do it for different reasons. But at the same time, we are saying that, yeah, DEI programs are basically worthless. They're sort of like, I shouldn't say they're worthless, right? But I should say that they are the result of the defanging of what we should actually be fighting for. So it's not as if we need to destroy DEI programs, of course, but again, how is it that the universities are getting away with it so stop talking about DEI and just start talking about belonging, right? Don't talk about inclusion, just talk about belonging. It's just a linguistic change, but the substance remains the same. And the fact that the substance can remain the same while the language changes and everything then can be fine shows you exactly what is under attack, which is really nothing.
I think as a Black person, as a gender person, and as, a queer person in general, when I think about DEI, right, there are good things that have come from DEI, obviously, for sure. But it is very much like a defanging, like you said, right? To quote my 6-year-old, right, the United States of America killed Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And what did they do? They gave him a holiday, right? Killed him and then gave him a holiday. That is the energy of DEI. Is okay, let's give you this thing so you can shut up. Right?
Yeah. And it's always like a separate space too. And,
absolutely.
The other thing too is that what counts as difference, right? like if we're talking about disability, right? I mean, how many students have a medical diagnosis? Of course, disability is a social. I mean, it's a material thing, but it's the result of the material world, right? If there were no stairs in this world, people who like use wheelchairs, right, would enter the same way as people who don't, and they wouldn't be disabled. It's the stairs that disable them. But think about how many students have some kind of medical diagnosis, right? ADD or whatever, ADHD. And so then it's a space for them too. And it's like waters it down to such an extent, which is not to say that that shouldn't be attended to, right? But it's like by doing that, there's a very, very, very big difference, between the national oppression of new African and Black people and people of ADD, right? But absolutely. Like they're grouped in the same place.
Absolutely. I'm not Christian, but I was raised Catholic. So sometimes like biblical things will come to me. And like during this conversation, I'm thinking about like Jesus was flipping tables, right? Like nobody ever wants to really talk about Jesus flipping tables. But sometimes
turning water into wine, seeing shit.
Look, I'm just saying. But sometimes I think people, and DEI is a great example of that, of like, oh, this is our seat at the table. Sometimes the universe sends you into a room to flip over the table, not to sit at it, So, yeah, I mean, like any part of reform, there are, of course, good things that come from it. But there's also parts of it that's like, I didn't actually need that, Like that actually doesn't help me at all, right? Like if we just don't have stairs, we just have ramps. I don't know. Like that helps everyone, right? Like that phrase that you use, like if we just talk about belonging instead of like diversity and inclusion, we got to meet our quota. That's what it feels like, right? Like we got to meet our quota. How many Black kids did we let into the school this year? So we can make sure we're being diverse.
Right. And of course, there's never any attention paid to like what companies, they're investing in their endowment. They're, millions of dollars and hundreds of millions of dollars, billions of dollars of endowments into what racist practices they're engaging in. There's never any talk about the one class, right? There's never any talk about class. That's, I think really speaks for itself. But it's also like, yes, Black students, international students, students of oppressed identities, genders, face educational barriers in higher education that should be addressed in a substantive way. But the demands of the movements that the university then absorbed, right? It cut that out. So it's like, fine, we'll take care of some of these students only once they get to the university, But it's like, how many of them are not even like seen at the university? So you don't have to consider them. Right? We're only considering the ones who are visible.
Absolutely.
Right? And so it's like, if you really want to like, have a commitment to DEI, then like, why don't you pay the janitors as much as you pay the professors, which is like not that much. So why don't you pay all of us as much as you pay administrators?
There we go. Because like, who's gonna like, if the janitors walk out, then who's gonna clean in here?
Yep.
Just saying, like that job is mad important.
Yep, it is. It's hard too. It
is.
It tells a great deal of like mental and physical labor and like strain.
Absolutely. Every time our maintenance dude comes in here, Jorge, I'm like, you want something to eat, Jorge? You need something? Like, I love Jorge.
That dude knows everything, man.
He does. He does know everything, right? And like, I mean, I'm never gonna ask Jorge how much he makes, but like, I'm sure he's not making as much as
the landlord.
The landlord. Right? Who does nothing. I've never even seen her before, actually.
I think she lives in Hawaii. So she probably won't listen to this. I don't know.
It's not surprising. If
probably
she
won't
does,
come up in her algorithm.
Yeah, I doubt it. But this conversation does make me think about charter schools as well, right? When we think about charter schools and like, my kids go to charter school, not because like it's public schools, but because like that's convenient, it's there, all those things. But like, charter schools love to kick out kids who have ADHD. They love to kick out Black and brown kids who have quote unquote behavioral issues, which is really probably just trauma, but whatever.
Or just like being a kid.
Or just being a kid. I cannot tell you the amount of times the school has called me because my 6-year-old was talking. Okay.
Yeah. Was that like a
I don't know what
assume
you
that's
want
gonna
me
be a
to
crime, you know?
I don't know what you like. Call me if he like hurts somebody.
Burns the school down.
You know, yeah. Like they called me one time because once again he told his classmates, this was last year, that the United States killed Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And I was like, I have no idea what you want me to do about that. The United States did kill Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Like, I'm sorry, I don't lie to my child.
Yeah.
You know? Like, but like you said, some of these kids don't even make it to college, right? Because they have not been set up to do so, right? They have not been set up in a place to be able to do that. And that's becoming more and more what, you know, capitalism wants, right? As they're getting rid of these public schools. There's so many, what used to be public schools near where I live. I live on the Far East Side, and like, this is not a school anymore. John Marshall Middle School is just like a building where cops hang out now, which is so freaky, because they don't want them to make it that far either.
Exactly, because they don't need. I mean, what do they need? What do they need? Like, I mean, like, what do you need to drive an Uber, right? I mean, what is like? Our youth are totally defuturized right now, and so it's not like they need a highly educated population, you know. Unfortunately, right? They're basically just like temporary warehouses until, you know, you reach the age where you can be imprisoned, which is getting lower and lower, unfortunately. And these people are just doing absolutely nothing and just getting rich off of it, you know, including the administrators, you know. Although I will say, like, at my university and the president's cabinet, the DEI person is the only one who actually does any work, and of course has like the fewest resources. But I will say that when I came to DePauw in 2016, I brought Eugene Puryear there, my very first semester. Recently, I brought our comrades from BAP, Erica Keynes from Baltimore, and Musa Springer from Atlanta. But the difference is, the last time I had to get the money from the Peace and Conflict Studies Committee, and the first time I got the money from the university, because they felt that they had this social pressure on them to support, Black Lives Matter. So if I just put Black Lives Matter on something, right, even if it was like more radical than that, you know, you would get approved for it. But now that we have a Black female president who is best friends with Condoleezza Rice, and these, you know, attacks are coming on, all we get is, we will obey the law while also maintaining our belief in diversity, equity, and inclusion, as if like those two things can't contradict each other.
What does that mean?
I know, right? That's what it takes to be an administrator, going back to my initial point.
God. Okay. All right. Well, that's it for the Naptown Breakdown. I appreciate it. We will be right back, and you'll be hearing from Nino Brown.
This is Destiny Glover, and I've had the honor of serving as the General Coordinator for the Indianapolis Liberation Center, working with victims of IMPD violence like Jada Traynor and the family of Adam Sykes. Recently, I've been working alongside ILC volunteers to fight against the unjust repression of immigrants here in Indy. I just returned from Camp Atterbury, where we led a car caravan of volunteers to protest against the use of the military grounds as a detention center. It's an honor to be amongst the groups that make up the Indianapolis Liberation Center, our city's liberated space where working, poor, and oppressed communities unite to build collective power. Located at 18th and Meridian Street, the Indianapolis Liberation Center is rooted in a fundamental truth. Liberation is never given by the oppressor. It is won through organized, united struggle. Unity is never simple, so we actively bridge the divides imposed on us by the ruling class through education, culture, politics, spirituality, and more. We reject competition and embrace cooperation, bringing together community members, organizers, and others to train a new generation of activists. Together, we're fighting for a world built on the interest of the people and the planet. By organizing across our city, we're reviving a collective spirit and renewing our belief in a better, necessary future. This work is hard, and it's not free. We depend on supporters like you to keep the center open and growing. Visit IndyLiberationCenter.org to learn more, donate, sign up for our weekly newsletter, and get involved today. Your support ensures this liberated space thrives, opening new avenues in the struggle for liberation. Thank you for your support. And now back to Naptown People's Radio.
And we're back on Naptown People's Radio. We are honored to be joined by Nino Brown, a Chicago-based organizer and educator with the Jericho movement, a movement of political prisoners, their friends, allies, and family members dedicated to freeing all political prisoners and prisoners of war in the U.S. He is also the Minister of Information at Healthy Hood Chicago and a member of Black Men Build. Welcome to the show, Nino.
Peace. Glad to be here.
So we were reading your chapter from the latest Hampton Institute reader called From the Academy to the Streets, Notes from a Working Class Think Tank, which was edited by Colin Jenkins and published through Iskra Books. And you have the second chapter in it called The Case for Proletarian Multinational Unity. And given that it's Black August and we are, in particular concentrating on the struggle for the freedom of Black people and New Africans and, especially political prisoners in the U.S. and prisoners of war, we thought that it would be good to have you on the show to talk about your argument, which is very compelling and I think very clearly laid out about basically the need for, first, the fact that the United States, contrary to what we're told, is not one nation, right? But it's many nations. It is a prison house of nations in many ways. Two, the necessity of multinational unity and proletarian multinational unity. So I guess, for our listeners, could you first talk to us a little bit about those points and your motivation behind writing this chapter?
Yeah, thank you for that introduction, and first up, I'll say happy Black August to commemorating. I think that we're in a period of time where we're facing, multiple cascading crises that are affecting working class people all over the world and all of humanity. This article was written in the context of the 2020 rebellions, which I want to remind folks was the largest mass mobilization of so-called American folks in the United States since the Civil Rights Movement. Also, these demonstrations were supported with sister demonstrations and protests in 60 countries all over the world. So, this struggle that is nominally provincial to Minneapolis explodes, captures the national attention and international attention, and really demonstrates, I think, the potential of what I argue is honestly the working class's strategic weapon, which is multinational working class unity. In the struggle against multinational imperialism, multinational corporate monopoly imperialism today. There's several things that I think, are elemental from a Marxist point of view, but to break them down in terms of understanding what is the United States and what are nations. I start off by talking about our brother Malcolm, who really brings Black nationalism and the validity of nationhood to Black people in ways that, still encapsulate the imagination today. He says that Plymouth Rock landed on us. We did not land on Plymouth Rock.
Yeah.
And that, the dining at the table of America doesn't necessarily make you a diner. Speaking to this condition, what we call special oppression, national oppression, African Americans, Black people, New Africans, however you want, people formulate the question. The point being is that, in this country, we have gone through a process of transmixing and molding and merging into a new nation. Previously we were Fulani, we were Togo, we were from Guinea-Bissau, Akan, many different tribes and nations in the western coast of Africa. But the process of the transatlantic slave trade, which over time robbed us of most, I want to say most, if not, not all of it, because I just came back from South Carolina, which, it's very distinctly African, and they've maintained many of their Africanisms. It's very apparent. But, they try to rob us of our language, our culture, our history. And, over time, we've become acculturated and developed through slavery and Jim Crow into a distinct nation. that faces not only class exploitation, but special oppression, national oppression. Essentially, the reason for this article and the motivation really was to intervene in the some would argue the second wave of the Black Lives Matter movement, where we saw, remarkably in towns where historically the Ku Klux Klan ran the entire town. They were the mayors. They were the police chiefs. They were the educators. We saw these Black Lives Matter protests pop up. We saw the cracks in the racist reality that is imposed on us, by the ruling class. So I think, to me, this article was a way to really ask that question: what is the strategic utility and historical necessity of multinational working class unity? Dr. King advanced it towards the end of his life. Fred Hampton, Malcolm X, began to approach it. And we know this as revolutionaries, that what the ruling class truly can stand is the complete unity of the proletariat. We are also a majority proletarian nation. In fact, we were brought to this country to work. And the class differentiation that occurred after, what they call the second reconstruction of the civil rights revolution allowed for an expanded middle class. But today, in a declining capitalism that is turning into, fascism before our very eyes. Yeah, at a time when, fascism is upon us and there's a proletarianization occurring across the board, across all so-called races and nationalities in this country, multinational working class unity is not only more tangible due to the deindustrialization and de-skilling of the working class, and then, what some people call neoliberalism, it's a strategic necessity for us to defeat the ruling class.
Dope. Thank you so much for that. Yeah. I'm wondering, why exactly is it so strategically crucial for revolution in the United States to build proletarian multinational unity? And given that how deeply rooted white supremacy is in U.S. capitalism, such that, you can't really separate the development of the two, of, national chauvinism, white supremacy on the one hand, and capitalism on the other. How exactly do we go about building that? Because I am wondering, for our skeptics out there who might be listening and thinking, oh, there's no way this can happen, sort of what would you say to them?
Undoubtedly, the United States is beginning as a distinctly settler colonial, society, becoming a advanced capitalist society after the Civil War, and developing into an imperialist power. It is a prison house of nations. There is a deep history of betrayals of the white working class, choosing racial solidarity over class solidarity. However, there are significant moments where there are or have been multinational working class unity, even if momentary, that has demonstrated the superior strength in terms of landing blows, frightening and scaring, and actually doing damage against the ruling class. What the ruling class can contain really is, so-called races, the different working classes of different races, nationalities, struggling in silos. When we look at, Bacon's Rebellion is often cited, and, he's often talked about as a uniter, and it was really out of circumstances that, produced the multinational unity of, poor European serfs, indigenous peoples, and enslaved Africans in the United States to challenge the plantocracy. Now, the political motivations aside, we actually see the reaction, the response of the ruling class at the time is not to engage in some wanton cookie cutter response to this united rebellion, what they do is they invent the concept of race. They invent this elaborate scheme of classification of human beings according to the fiction of race, right? So it is an invention. It is a creation, and it can be uncreated. The periods of time where we see, even momentarily, during the Civil War, which we, argue was a revolution. It was a revolution against slavery in the ascendant, capitalist political system, overtook it. It was really an industrial struggle for wage labor over slave labor, which was sublimated ultimately into the new capitalist system. So the strategic importance of Black and white unity in that concrete scenario or situation, rather, is the unity that breaks the slaveocracy's back and builds the radical Reconstruction era and period, where we see 12 years of Black political rule in the South, and particularly in the Black Belt South, where we see progressive legislation, the building of public schools and public infrastructure, healthcare, reform for women's rights, and so on, welfare for the disabled. We see monumentous political and social economic advances. The benefits, the economic, social, political wins and victories that we can gain through multinational unity, they are vastly superior and have vastly superior staying power compared to, these sectional, nominal, provincial, I would say racial, racist ways of, struggling in silos, which is, how we see the white labor movement ultimately have to reach across to build with Black workers, because you cannot compete with labor that the ruling class will pay less for, right? Yep. It's a strategic necessity. You understand that organizing labor, if you're serious about winning.
Absolutely. That's tremendously helpful. We were just doing a study of Reconstruction, and I've studied that era before, but each time I find a new social gain that was made under what, Du Bois called the dictatorship of the proletariat during that time period. And these are social gains that now seem like unimaginable, but we actually accomplished them together until the counter-revolution against that era. No, so this leads me into your work with the Jericho movement, because the multinational uprisings of the 50s and 60s and 70s culminated in intense repression as well as absorption, and accommodation. But the repression, assassination of leaders, they were driven into exile. So many were incarcerated and imprisoned. Many of them, of course, belonging to Black, New African groups. And some of those groups, of course, had white participants, like the Black Liberation Army. I'm thinking of David Gilbert, for example. And I'm wondering what the approach Jericho takes to political prisoners regarding both the importance of attending to national oppression as well as the importance of multinational proletarian unity.
Yeah, I think absolutely. When you look at what prisons are and the history of prisons in the United States, they are not for correction. They are for social control. I was just giving a speech today, actually, at a church, referencing Shackled and Chained, a book by Eugene Perrier, which makes an excellent argument in arguing for understanding prisons as a form of social control and population control as well. Because after the radical 1960s and, some of the 1970s, what we see is the counter-revolution setting in. And the Reagan Revolution, the silent majority, the white backlash that follows every Black wave of progression, coalesces into the Reagan administration and carries out effectively a political and social and economic counter-revolution, not unlike the one that we are still living in today, under, Donald Trump, who, Ronald Reagan in many ways pre-shadows. So the development of the prison system, it was not happenstance with the political repression that was going on because, the movements were criminalized. That's how the ruling class was able to justify, this mass wanton terror by saying that the Black Panther Party, the Brown Berets, the American Indian Movement, the Young Lords, the Communist Party, I mean, the whole gamut of left radical socialist communist political organizations, but also Black nationalists, anti-colonial, national liberationists, Pan-African organizations, were all with a broad swath painted as criminals. And, once they're deemed criminals, they are dealt with by the strong arm of the law, the state, the repressive apparatus, which the prison is a central component piece of. So, in the prison system, the prisons are a product of the society that they're born in, and the United States is a deeply racist, white supremacist society, and the type of workers and the type of culture necessary in the prison system to maintain its political unity as a prison system is the necessary division of the workers, of the prisoners, the lumpen proletariat into racialized groupings that are fighting over scraps, fighting over arbitrary territory, arbitrary power that is really ephemeral and tenuous at best. So we learned this from our comrades who have been inside the belly of the beast, have been behind enemy lines, revealing how the prison is run by Nazis, by white supremacists outright. They divide the prisoners against each other to maintain their unity, because we see unity of the prisoners, such as the Attica Rebellion, demonstrates once again, and it was drowned in blood, which is a common occurrence, a common refrain of the ruling class whenever we do approximate a more powerful multinational unity. The populist movement in the late 1890s drowned in blood, thousands and thousands of Black and white workers gunned down. The Poor People's Campaign, Dr. King, assassination, Fred Hampton, assassination, the Communist Party, targeted for destruction, similar to the Black Panther Party, in building their Rainbow Coalition and building alliances, also had to be taken out, and however, some more nationalist formations, or narrow nationalist formations are allowed to survive because they are not an anathema to the system. So when we look at the prison system in Jericho, first off, we defend all of the historical movements that produced our comrades and how they cut their teeth, in becoming politically active and thus, later becoming political prisoners. But for us, it's necessary because it already is existent. From SDS to the Weather Underground to just white anti-imperialists, environmentalists. There are anarchists who are also a few anarchists white anarchists, I might add, that the Jericho movement recognizes as political prisoners. So we make no bones about racial exclusivity. It's not our politic. Our comrades, have been liberated by comrades, period, of all races. The Maryland Buck Brigade, that helped to free Assata Shakur.
Right.
Some of my comrades in the United Freedom Front, Kazi Touré and his co-defendants, white anti-imperialists from middle-class backgrounds who committed class suicide and decided to, pay the ultimate price, right, to defend Black activists who were under attack and thus, drawing in the line of fire. And that's essentially what it means to be a comrade, is to, be also in the line of fire. If I'm in the line of fire, then you're also in the line. We're all in it, So it's instrumental to the Jericho movement. We think that multinational unity is what they fear, and we have to build it as a strategic weapon for sure in the prison system, given how violence-prone and deadly the consequences of it festering and being stoked by the prison guards and racist, systems. We see how dangerous it is. It'll just lead to a bloodbath and fratricide, which we already have going on.
Absolutely. And we've had a couple of guests on the show talking about prisons as a microcosm of society and how guards and specifically, the wardens use racial divides to maintain control of the prisoners so that they're warring against each other and not uniting, against the guards and the warden, against whom they, have a common interest. And speaking metaphorically, if we're in a battle and we're under attack and you're passing me a gun, I'm not going to be, thinking about what, nationality you are or what your ideology is. I'm going to take that gun because I need it in the heat of the battle. So at the end of your chapter, you talk about how the revolt of Black New Africans and Africans in America is often the powder keg of broader revolutionary struggles. And I can definitely see that historically. And I wanted to ask if you could just sort of expand on that a little bit and how that relates to building proletarian multinational unity.
Yeah, if anything, the 2020 rebellions demonstrated just as much. It was W.E.B. Du Bois who put it so cogently that for democracy in the United States, the touchstone is us, is Black people, right? If you want to know how democratic and fair and free or equal anything is in the United States, well, you can just look. Do Black people, how do they fare? Do they have it? If they don't have it, then it doesn't really exist.
Right.
And it's tenuous at best, right? Because what you allow to happen to one group of people,
yep,
you essentially create precedent for it to happen to any one of us. And we see this, even in the history of lynchings and state repression. The rope wasn't just confined solely to Blacks or the formerly enslaved or New Africans. We saw Chicanos, white people, Asians. And it was a political tool, It was obviously racist, but it was also a tool against, those who were politically against the system. So, when you look at Black people being a powder keg, it has to do with that fundamental question of democracy and the class struggle. When you look at the 2020 rebellion, when you look at the radical 1960s, even to an extent, when you look at the populist movement and the farmer labor movement in the 1890s, you see Black people being the motor force for generating political movements that inspire and educate, radicalize even the labor, in specifically in the labor movement in the AFL-CIO, which was a craft union that refused to organize lower wage workers who happened to be mostly Black, New Africans, non-white workers. So, but it was in these industries where our concentration was truly to be in the veins and in the arteries of capital. If you look at where our labor is concentrated in these major ports, in these major cities, in these key sectors of the economy and the nation's, geography, where, if politically conscious, we're able to broaden our struggle, not to just fight exclusively for our rights, but to question the entire system as a whole. So I think this formulation of Black people being a powder keg in the system has just been shown time and time again, whether it's the Black Power movement inspiring women's power and inspiring brown power and brown pride, to the Black Lives Matter movement, and people made other iterations of, so-and-so matters, which, I think was, a bit tried and played out, but nonetheless, the thesis still remains to be true, right? And as I mentioned before, this wasn't just a Black, problem. 60 countries, people in Korea, in Japan, in India, all over the world were carrying out solidarity demonstrations because of the struggle that took place after the murder of George Floyd in May 2020, during this global pandemic. So that alone, I think, demonstrates yet again the sparking factor, the catalyzing role that Black labor, plays in the overall destruction of capitalism, right? The contradictions are sharper and more heightened, and because we've been at the bottom of society, we know from our historical and political and social experience, we have a vantage point that politically translated actually will lead to, the more lasting defeats of capitalism. As I mentioned before, when we have a strategic multinational unity, the things we can gain and win from that are far superior and far outlast whatever other crumbs they may give to this racialized community versus another racialized community.
Yeah, it's really apropos that you end with a nod to W.E.B. Du Bois, because I believe that when this episode comes out, it will be the 62nd anniversary of his death and when he was in Ghana. And he also, by the way, died, of course, as a member of the Communist Party, although he joined when he was 93 years old, so quite later in life. But I want to thank you for coming on the show, Nino. It's been really, really excellent. I know that many of our listeners have seen you speak before. You were at the grand opening of our Liberation Center in October of 2023, and we definitely hope to have you back soon. And in the meantime, it is great to have you on the show, and we hope to have you back here soon as well.
Awesome, indeed. It was the pleasure's all mine. I think that I'm glad that we have mediums like this to spread more revolutionary consciousness. And thank you for a wonderful time.
That's it for this segment of Naptown People's Radio. After a short break, we will be right back.
We said we're not going to fight capitalism with Black capitalism, but we're going to fight it with socialism. Socialism is the people. You're afraid of yourself. If you're afraid of socialism, you're afraid of yourself. Everything would be all right if everything was put back in the hands of the people. And we're going to have to put it back in the hands of the people.
And we're back on Naptown People's Radio. So, Dani, who gets the Circle City shout out this week?
All right. So this week's Circle City shout out goes to Circle City Sangha. Say that 3 times fast. Okay. For listeners who do not know, a Sangha is a Buddhist community of monks, nuns, novices, and lay people. So lots and lots of people can be a part of a Sangha. Circle City Sangha was founded in October 2021. It is a group of mindfulness practitioners in the Plum Village tradition of Buddhism. So the Plum Village tradition was founded by Zen master Thich Nhat Hanh during the Vietnam War as a response to violence, colonialism, and oppression. Plum Village practices engaged Buddhism in an effort to encourage practitioners to apply Buddhist ethics in our communities and the world around us. I came across Thich Nhat Hanh way in college, like a million years ago, and was like, Thich Nhat Hanh is the reason I am a vegetarian. He's the reason why I was like, you know what, I'm just going to do it. So Thich Nhat Hanh has a special place in my heart. You should do some research on Thich Nhat Hanh to learn more, but he has a special place in my heart. So Circle City Sangha is committed to the liberation of all beings, and their practice is in pursuit of that liberation. Each week, they meet to sit in meditation, read the Dharma, and share joys and difficulties with each other. I've attended a few of them since they joined the Indianapolis Liberation Center. I also may or may not have cried at a few of those, but If you know me, that's just kind of who I am. But it always is amazing, and it's always a peaceful experience. It's a great group of people that you get to hang out with. Currently, we're reading Siddhartha, which is like
Herman Hesse?
Siddhartha, which is like this dude who was a prince, and then he leaves after he has a baby. I'm a little judgy there. I'm like, you just had this baby, bro. But like, he goes to be a monk, and he's trying to find liberation. Like, that's his whole thing. It's like, how do I get to liberation? It's super dope. So I'm enjoying that. Circle City Sangha meets every Saturday between 9:30 and 11. That is here at the Indianapolis Liberation Center, 1800 North Meridian Street. All are encouraged to attend regardless of prior experience, knowledge, or even faith, right? You can be an atheist and come hang out. You can be a Christian, come hang out. So shout out to Circle City Sangha.
Yeah, and I just want to say I was so excited when they reached out to us. Hannah Harris is the main person that I know in that group, and I was just so excited because we had been looking for something like that. This center is a space for collaboration, and so after an event featuring Shaka Shakur, we had Hannah lead us in a mindfulness practice. It was really guided around like recommitting ourselves to the struggle for justice for all and Shaka and political prisoners. And it was such an amazing way to end the event. As soon as I got permission to relax and unwind, I was like, all right. And I left, and it really did. You know, the mind is part of the body. We often forget that we think there's a separation, but it was really helpful. I really value our relationship with them and their contributions to the center. So thank you, Dani. So before we wrap up, I'd like to tell our listeners about a couple of upcoming events. The first is tonight, Wednesday, August 27th. That is our annual Black August Liberation Forum. This one is titled From the U.S. to the Sahel Until Victory. We will be talking about the Alliance of Sahel States, which has reignited the spirit of Pan-African resistance across the continent and the world. We'll, of course, be talking about George Jackson, but digging deeper behind the symbol into the material context that really created his intellect as well as his organizing. And then we'll be hearing from Haki Kwali Shakur, I mentioned last episode, a brilliant New African historian and organizer and national spokesperson for the August 3rd Collective. That'll be at the Liberation Center at 6 p.m. on Wednesday, August 27th. Then on Thursday, August 28th, we have two options for you at the center. The first is going to be the last module in our Summer School for Socialism course, which is put on by the People's Forum from New York City. And it's going to be about what is to be done. That will be here on the third floor at the center. And then we are also going to have our Black August film screening of Free Angela and All Political Prisoners. That is sponsored by Touchgrass Indie and Eclectic Ecology, Hope Packages, and the Indiana chapter of the Shaka Shakur Freedom Campaign. That will be, again, Thursday, August 28th at 6 p.m. That'll be in the basement. $5 donation is suggested. So if you can, spare it, please. If you can spare more, please. And finally, I'd like to remind everybody that the days are numbered for our Black August bundles at the Liberation Center store. We got 3 carefully crafted bundles with books, pamphlets, magazines, and T-shirts to support our commitment to Black August and the Black struggle year-round, help save money while you're doing it, to advance the struggle. So go to indieliberationcenter.org/store to check that out. And that's it for this episode of Naptown People's Radio. If you found today's discussion useful, pass it on, leave a comment, and listen for our next episode to drop. Support us at support.pslindianapolis.org. And if you have a suggestion for the show, email our producer, Dakota, at producer@naptownpeoplesradio.com. The road ahead is long, but we walk it together. Study with your comrades, build with your community, and always remember, theory without action is paralysis, but action without theory is chaos. Once again, I'm your host, Derek Ford, here with my comrade and co-host,
Dani Abdullah.
Stay dangerous, stay disciplined, and stay in the struggle.
we trying to create a movement. We got a chance to do something in Indiana that brothers like myself been talking about for the last 40 years. When I first became political and we was organized behind the walls in the 80s and 90s, some of the stuff that we doing now with the different programs and the different institutions that we have and things like the Indie Center is things that we used to talk about and dream about doing. And now we doing them. See what I'm saying? We doing it. And we got to keep that momentum going. And it's also generation. So as the next generation come up, you know what I'm saying? It's on y'all to take it to the next level and take it to the next stage.
Salute, Shaka Shakur.